Order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for March 27th, 2023. The first order of business tonight is approval of the agenda. If there are no changes, I entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Vento. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the agenda is approved. Next, we're on to approval of the March 13th, 2023 Transportation Committee meeting minutes. Not sure, other than John, who was here, but I guess you guys were all here for that one. So then I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Morales. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay, and the minutes are approved. And now we're going to move to employee recognition. This is something we get to do at this committee often, so I'm going to turn it over first to Ms. Kindergrass.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. Today, we are pleased to recognize two employees from rail transportation, a train operator and a rail supervisor. But first, just for some context, as Chair Barber mentioned, at this committee, once a month, Metro Transit brings employees forward to be recognized. And usually these employees have been nominated by their managers or supervisors, and nominations are reviewed and approved by the leadership from their department or division. And it's always difficult to select because we have so many people doing such great work every day. But today, the two situations we're going to hear about are situations that are difficult to hear about, but are examples of some of the challenging incidents our employees are contending with on our system. The responses to these events, however, speak to the selflessness and the care our employees show for each other and our customers, even during some of the most challenging of circumstances. So with that, I'll hand it off to our first presenter, Shoaib Balim.
First of all, thank you for having us. Madam Chair, members of the committee, today I am honored and proud to present train operator Justin Craig. Justin joined Metro Transit as a bus operator in 2015, and he moved to rail in 2018. He's now a train operator on the Green Line. This incident that is being recognized for happened on the Blue Line, but I am honored that he came to Green Line. I get to present him. Earlier this month, Justin was operating a southbound train, contacted the Rail Control Center to inform that a passenger was being assaulted. Justin asked permission to leave the cab and was given permission to do so. Operators in these situations are instructed to use their best judgment and generally to keep a safe distance until police can arrive. In this case, Justin's selflessness intervention likely prevented a much more serious outcome. And I'm honored that Justin is working on my team, and thank you for being with us, Justin. Thank you.
Madam Chair, our second presenter is Jake Rooney.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Today I'm proud to present Rail Transit Supervisor Jody Moore. Jody joined Metro Transit in October of 2021 and brought with him a wealth of knowledge from a background in heavy rail. On February 12th, Rail Transit Supervisor Jody Moore took a phone call from an operator while working the Blue Line desk. During the call, the operator reported that he had just been physically assaulted at Franklin Platform while waiting to make relief. A customer had just shoved him off the platform into the trackway, kicked him, and punched him. Jody remained calm and kept the operator on the phone while directing others in the RCC to call police. Jody inquired several times during the phone call if the operator was in a safe location away from the aggressive individual. While on the phone, the operator was hit in the face with a thrown beer bottle. Jody asked all the right questions, including asking the operator if they needed medical attention. He was able to locate the suspect on camera and followed him as he fled the scene on foot. As MTPD officers arrived, he was able to give the updated location through another supervisor who was on the phone with TCC. Officers located and arrested the subject. Jody's reaction and handling of a bad situation was textbook. He quickly got police involved, showed great concern and empathy for the operator, and professionally managed this situation without losing sight of everything else going on throughout the railroad. It's my pleasure to present Jody.
Meet the both of you, and I'll meet you over there.
Yes, that's what I was looking for.
Okay, after I fill your hands. Thank you so much. Oh, there you go, we'll get this off. We were joking about we can never get it coordinated, right? So, thank you.
Yay.
Very nice.
Yay.
Thank you again for all you do. And that is one of our favorite things we get to do here at the committee, so. And now we're gonna move on to reports. Our first will be NTS Director Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. An update on the motor vehicle sales tax. Motor vehicles have a sales tax rate of 6.875%. And these funds are our largest single source of transit funding. So we pay special attention to how MVEST is doing. Motor vehicle sales tax is also a very volatile source. It goes up and down. It's often the first expense a family will, put off if economic times get harder. So MVEST is forecast by the state and is updated twice a year in November and February. In 2022, there was about $1 billion in the state received in MVEST receipts, and about $365 million of that comes to the council. So it's a significant portion of our transportation funding. Both bus operations as well as contracted service and planning in MTS. As well as passing it through to suburban transit providers. You'll hear more about MVEST in upcoming budgeting sessions and kind of the role of it overall, but I will occasionally bring you updates on performance of how MVEST is doing, and I can report tonight on February 2023 receipts. So the council's receipts in February were $26 million, an increase of 8% from February 2022. The council's auto receipts for January were $29 million, which was a 12% increase from January 2022. And the auto receipts for the last 6 months were $185 million, which was about a 9% increase over the same period last year. And then finally, our year-to-date receipts for the 2 months of the year are $55.5 million, which is $4.3 million above the forecast number, or about 8% above, which is good. We budgeted about 95% because of that volatility. Just a couple other quick notes on auto sales, since obviously they're what are the key input to some of our funding. In February, there in the United States were 1.161 million new cars sold, up from 1.066 million in January. So this is happening. There seems to be good health in new car sales, despite rising interest rates and high transaction prices. So if you haven't bought a new car recently, the average new car sells for $49,000, which is 30% higher than 3 years ago in February 2020, when it was below $38,000. Factor in loan rates that are approaching 7% on new cars and 8% on used cars. Car payments are over $700, and many, more than ever, are over $1,000. So there's lots of reasons to, other than how it would be detrimental to our transit funding, lots of reasons to walk or roll, bike, or ride transit. So along those lines, my second update is on a planning study that we're beginning to wrap up, and inviting you to upcoming workshops on this study, which is on travel demand management in the region. So travel demand management, or TDM, is a set of strategies, programs, and projects to help meet travel options efficiently with less reliance on single occupancy vehicles. So the implementation, the outcome of TDM is healthier communities, reduced congestion, reduced transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions, and importantly, reduced household transportation costs. A series of workshops were held in August 2022 that helped us inform the goals and objectives for TDM in the region and evaluated existing programs. So now, a number of months later, we're preparing 2 workshops in April that are oriented towards seeking feedback on recommended strategies and on their implementation. So we're beginning to wrap up the study. A virtual workshop will be held on Wednesday, April 19th from 3:30 to 6, and we'll be emailing all the council members this information immediately after this meeting. Most of this virtual workshop is actually during a council meeting, so it may not be a good option, but we'll also be holding a in-person workshop on Thursday, April 20th from 9 to 11:30 here at the council offices. So invited participants will be other policymakers around the region, some of the key staff of stakeholders, and other interested parties. So April 20th, 9 to 11:30 here, and we hope you'll be able to join us. With that, Madam Chair, I can answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Charles, this is really fascinating information for somebody who is new to all this. You mentioned that the 2022 forecast is about $1 billion?
2022 receipts, Madam Chair, Councilmember Vento, 2022 tax receipts were about $1 billion in the state.
Receipts were about $1 billion.
And those funds are statutorily dedicated 60% to transportation, 60% to highways, 40% to transit, 36% of that being to the metropolitan area transit programs.
Okay, and I'm writing notes quickly here. And what percent increase was that you mentioned? Not a big deal if it's not there. I thought.
Yeah, I mean, if we compare the last 6 months, it's about a 9% increase
Okay.
over the same period
Okay.
last year, which tracks with how we're seeing, inflation in vehicle prices.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions or comments? Just my comment on MVES, that's very good news. We have not been hearing this kind of news for a little while with both the shortages and supply out in the market and people kind of holding back on some of those purchases. So this is really favorable for us. It helps us plan better and budget better. So I think, yeah, thank you. All right, next we're on to Metro Transit General Manager Leslie Canderas.
All right, Chair Barber, committee members. A couple quick updates for you. First off, just wanted to thank all the council members who are able to participate in last Wednesday's Transit Driver Appreciation Day festivities. I know people really appreciated getting to meet some new council members and re-greet some returning council members. So thank you for those of you who were able to make that work in your really busy schedules. I also wanted to mention we are happy to arrange more times for you to be able to ride along with our employees, tour our facilities, just interact more with our staff. And so certainly if you are interested in partaking in those opportunities, you can start by reaching out to me. I'll get you plugged in with the right person or the right department. But there really is no substitute to learning Metro Transit, to just being out on the system, meeting our employees, and experiencing it firsthand. So always an open invitation. You can start with me and we'll get it arranged. My other update relates to an upcoming conference that's going to be held in Minneapolis. An internal staff working group for Metro Transit and MTS are in the final month of preparations to hold the 2023 American Public Transportation Association, or APTA's, Mobility Conference. Just for some background, APTA is a nonprofit organization headquartered in DC, and it's focused on all modes of public transportation in North America. APTA serves as an advocate for agencies with the federal government, acts as a diverse networking conduit to connect agencies, provides numerous educational opportunities, and also has a broad portfolio of professional development activities. And we are a member of APTA. The mobility conference that's coming here is going to be held in downtown Minneapolis from April 23rd through the 26th, and we're expecting to host about 1,000 industry professionals from across our continent. This conference addresses the critical priorities and challenges facing bus and paratransit systems and explores the changing environment in which systems operate in today's mobility landscape. Participants will have the opportunity to explore specialty workshops, APTA's bus display, and the products and services showcase, as well as technical tours. Chief Operating Officer Brian Funk is going to be presenting a more comprehensive update on this conference. That'll either happen in this meeting on April 10th or the council meeting on April 12th. We're still arranging the details, so there will be more information to come, but I wanted to put it on your radar. As board members of our transit agency, council members, you are able and invited to participate. So as the host agency, you're able to partake by bringing your agency badge in any of the educational sessions. So we can certainly provide you with more information, and again, we'll be bringing a more formal presentation, but April 23rd through the 26th in Minneapolis. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I'm just going to echo what Leslie said, that the best way to learn about some of these things when we're making decisions on what things is to go out and do some of these tours, see some of our facilities. Our staff is always happy to show us some of the things behind the scenes, and I think you learn so much more, and it really makes sense when we're doing some of the actions that we're doing on the committee. Councilmember Carter.
Maybe I didn't hear, but what's the theme of the mobility conference this year?
That's a good question. If there's a specific theme, I'm looking to see if our Chief Operating Officer has an answer to that.
No specific theme this year. I will say, Chair Barber and council members, again, Brian Funk, Chief Operating Officer. Not a specific theme for this conference, although I will say that the dominant topics are going to be workforce strategies, recruiting and retention, safety on transit, public safety, employee safety, and then capital investments, in particular bus rapid transit, which Katie and her team and Nick's team will be able to highlight through our technical tours.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else? All right, thank you very much. Our next report, Councilmember Pacheco.
Just my quick report. No, I actually took the bus yesterday, and I was running downtown. My daughter's 11, and there was an argument over the fare. Those two guys come on. One said he's going to use his badge and stuff. The driver told him to sit down, and they were kind of trying to muddle through it, and I offered my $2 and so did actually somebody else. But they sat down, and I thought, and then we got to the 2 stops later, and just as the door opened to let people in, there was a fight. And the bus driver said, "You're not coming in here." And he shut the door and moved on. So in both cases, I thought the driver did a good job. I explained to my 11-year-old what's going on. It was an adventure. But I thought they did well. He did well. The 2 people were fighting were behind us and in the mirror after we moved on. So I'll give you my report.
Oh, thank you. Actually, that's much appreciated. I think that we always like to hear some of the good stories. We don't always, so I appreciate that. Our next report is actually, normally would be our Transportation Advisory Board, or TAB report. We have one of our citizen representatives who's typically here. He can't join us this evening. It's Mr. Peter Dugan, and he usually reports back on the activities that take place at TAB from the our prior TAB meeting. But so he'll be back here next month, but his report is attached into your minutes if you want to take a look at that. And then if you have any questions, probably reach out either to myself or to Director Carlson, and we can clarify anything if there are questions. All right, then we are on to our consent agenda. There are 2 items on consent tonight. I'd entertain a motion to approve the items on consent.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Vento. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And the items on consent are adopted. Moving to our non-consent business, the first item is business item 2023-60, which has to do with the Metro F line, and we have Jake Knight and Katie Roth here to present.
Chair Barber, committee members, my name is Jake Knight. I use he, him pronouns, and you can call me Jake. I'm a senior planner in the Arterial BRT group. at Metro Transit.
And good afternoon, Chair Barber, council members. My name is Katie Roth. I'm the director of Arterial BRT. I use she, her pronouns, and you can call me Katie.
Proposed action 2023-60 deals with the release of the Metro F-Line Recommended Corridor Plan and associated public engagement. The corridor plan identifies station locations along the F-Line and provides us direction as we move into the engineering phases of the F-Line project. The recommended corridor plan follows up on the draft corridor plan, which was released and subject to public comment in late 2022.
And Madam Chair and council members, since this is the first business item regarding Arterial BRT that's come before the new council, I want to take just a few minutes ahead of the item that Jake will present to provide an overview of the program. I also look forward to providing a broader overall update on Arterial BRT and all of the lines in development at a presentation to the full council this summer. So when it opens in 2026, the F-Line project will be the 6th Arterial BRT line in the Metro network. The 3 existing lines, the A, C, and D lines, have each attracted significant growth in ridership upon opening and have really proven to be among Metro Transit's most resilient at retaining riders throughout the pandemic. This is a product of the markets they serve, the places they go, dense urban corridors with a diverse mix of all-day, all-purpose trips to work, school, all kinds of lifestyle destinations, and also the high-quality services and facilities that we provide through these projects. All of these lines use a standard toolkit of the features shown here to make our most used bus routes faster and easier to use. So first, buses make fewer stops than the local services that they replace. At those stop locations, like is shown here, we invest in stations with heat, light, security features to make the wait more comfortable for customers. Like on rail, customers pay before boarding and can enter through any door of the vehicle. And also like on rail, they are subject to fare inspection on board. Buses travel faster in each of these corridors through a mix of transit priority at traffic lights, and they use stretches of bus-only lanes in places as well. And this is all tied together with frequent all-day service that's there to serve all kinds of customer trips across different parts of the day. So the F-Line in particular will apply that set of features to the Route 10 corridor, which travels about 13 miles from downtown Minneapolis to the Northtown Transit Center in Blaine, along primarily Central and University Avenues. Route 10 is consistently among the top 5 highest ridership bus routes in the region, and the F-Line will substantially upgrade and replace that route with faster service and the current recommended plan for 32 enhanced stations along the way. The project cost, including all of the construction to build these stations, to purchase and install customer-facing technology elements, to design and deliver the line, and purchase a fleet of 18 buses, is currently estimated at $98 million. This project cost estimate was updated late last year and reflects standard FTA contingency and escalation factors for a project at really this level of development, which is in early planning. So in addition to the planning work that's the subject of today's business item, I wanted to share 3 other major updates on the project for your awareness. First is a recent update regarding funding for the project. The day after the new council members were sworn in, the F-Line was one of 18 major transit projects recommended for funding by President Biden in his 2024 budget. The F-Line is what's called a small starts project as part of the FTA, or Federal Transit Administration's Capital Investment Grant Program, and is recommended for $45.3 million under that program. That funding, together with already secured funding from the state and allocated by the Transportation Advisory Board, or TAB, would fully fund the F-Line project. With this announcement, we also anticipate that the funding that has been identified for, or proposed rather, for Arterial BRT, both in the governor's proposal and in various bills in the House and Senate, would be able to significantly advance the G and H lines, which come next in the program. Secondly, as we work to finalize the plan for station locations through Jake's item here tonight, we're also actively procuring for an engineering and construction administration consultant, and we'll seek to bring forward a contract award through the council in approximately June of this year. And finally, we are coordinating very closely with a study effort led by MnDOT to envision broader future changes to highways 47 and 65 rather, Central and University Avenues, the same corridors that this line will run on, and will continue to do so as each effort, our project and their study, advance in parallel. So with that, I'll hand things off to Jake to speak specifically to the corridor plan, and then we'll both be available for questions.
Thank you, Katie. Chair Barber, committee members. On the screen in front of you is our project schedule for the F-line. The structure of this schedule is similar to what we've used for previous arterial BRT lines as we continue to standardize our project development process. The F-line was identified in March of 2021 through council action approving the alignment or the routing of the F-line. Since then, we've been working closely with our agency partners to coordinate our various projects and identify station locations. We've been meeting with the technical advisory group since January of 2022, about every month, to identify proposed locations for F-line stations. The Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC, is represented by MnDOT, our county partners, as well as city partners. Our proposed station locations were compiled into a draft corridor plan, which was released in late 2022 and subject to a public comment period, as I said earlier. We've taken that feedback received from community and our agency partners and incorporated that into a recommended corridor plan, which we hope to release in just a few weeks pending council approval. We'll then incorporate the feedback from this second public comment period into a final corridor plan, which we anticipate bringing to the council later this summer. It is that final corridor plan which is what we'll be seeking action on from the council to provide us with policy direction as we move into the engineering phase of our project. Around that time, we'll begin engineering and detailed design of F-line stations, with construction occurring over 2025 and 2026, and the F-line opening for service in 2026. The corridor plan, the purpose of the corridor plan is simply to identify station locations. That is, the intersections where stations will be located, and within those intersections, the quadrants or the corners of the intersection where platforms will be located. This is the essential pieces that the council acts on when approving the corridor plan. Other items provided for context in the corridor plan are bus service concepts, our agency's priorities for bus priority treatments, and other speed and reliability treatments in order to achieve our goals, as well as some project history and planning background. I'd like to highlight a few things that we did and what we heard during our draft corridor plan public comment period, which again was a 6-week period over the last month of 2022. During that time, we engaged and sent materials to over 13,000 email addresses of Route 10 riders, other folks who are interested in the F-line, and many other Metro Transit customers. We sent about as many postcards to all homes and businesses in the F-line corridor. We were able to engage with over 600 folks at 27 different events in community, at neighborhood groups, and other established groups in community. Importantly, we went out and knocked doors. We visited with over 120 properties, talking to station neighbors, dropping materials, and making sure that the folks who might be nearest F-line stations are aware of the project and can provide input and participate in the process. We collaborated with our local elected officials and our public agency partners to share F-line information through their websites, newsletters, and social media. These are among a variety of different tools that we use to get out the word about the F-line and make sure folks have an opportunity to provide feedback. Over the course of our draft corridor plan public comment period, we heard from over 330, we received 332 comments via a survey, email, and phone. The majority of those comments were received via a survey, and we were able to collect demographic information from those folks. I'm happy to say that the majority of those who responded to our survey live in the corridor, as indicated by our home zip code map shown on the right. You'll see the zip codes in darker purple indicate where we received more comments. Again, I'm happy to say that most of the comments were received from folks who live near the line, and that those were distributed relatively evenly. We also heard a lot from, the majority of folks we heard from are Metro Transit users and folks who would be affected by the service. Majority of those we heard from identified as white and had lower than regional average incomes. 17% of those that we heard from identified as having a disability. In terms of what we heard, about 3 in 4 comments received were in support of our draft corridor plan. We did receive 1 petition letter from a nearby business in opposition to the Central and First Avenue / 7th Street station, and I'll be talking about that a bit in a couple slides. Some of the themes we heard loud and clear support for bus priority treatments and other ways that we can improve speed and reliability. We heard the importance of pedestrian connections and creating a good environment for folks to access and be around F-line stations. We heard the importance of integrating bike facilities and support for improved access to destinations, among others. The graph on the right shows the stations in which we received the most number of comments, the top being at Central and First Avenue / 7th Street, Central and Lowry, and Central and Spring. We then, having read all of the comments, incorporating any new information, confirming previous assumptions and information that were received, as well as incorporating feedback from our agency partners, we are at this time not recommending any changes to the station or platform locations in the recommended corridor plan. That is to say, the station platforms and locations identified in the draft corridor plan are what will be continued into this recommended corridor plan in front of you today. We did, however, conduct additional analysis at locations where we heard the most feedback, requesting a change or in opposition to what was proposed. And those 4 locations are shown here on the screen at Central and Lowry, Central and 22nd Avenue, Central and Spring, and Central and First Avenue / 7th Street. All of these are in the southern third of our F-line corridor. I'd like to provide an example of some of the additional analysis that we conducted, and that is included in the recommended corridor plan. So here we're at Central and First Avenue / 7th Street, particularly the southbound platform location. This is the subject of the petition letter that we received from the nearby business Otter's Saloon. Their concerns and the concerns of their supporters were primarily explicitly over the loss of on-street parking in front of the business on Central Avenue. Having conducted preliminary analysis, we think that the addition of a southbound platform at this location would result in approximately 3 to 5 total parking spaces being removed, which is about 10% of the public on-street parking spaces within a 2-minute walk or roll of the intersection. We compared the baseline location to 2 other alternative locations that were identified. Those are shown here on the map in the pink boxes, whereas the proposed initial or baseline location is shown in the gold box. We compared our baseline recommendation, or that which was included in the draft corridor plan. We compared that to 2 alternative locations using several criteria, those being safe pedestrian crossings, access to destinations, station spacing, the availability of space or right-of-way, speed and reliability implications, traffic operations, and the concern that was raised by community on street parking. We found safety concerns with the two alternatives that we looked at and did not find those same concerns at our baseline location. Given these factors and input from our agency partners, we are not recommending a change in the recommended corridor plan. That is to say, the baseline location proposed in the draft is being carried forward into the recommended corridor plan for your consideration. Importantly, we will continue to engage with the stakeholders at this location and throughout the corridor, and also seek to minimize and mitigate any impacts as we continue through our project into more detailed station design. So continuing with the recommended corridor plan engagement, our public comment period, we are anticipating for April 12th through May 14th. We expect to include a survey similar to what we had for our draft corridor plan and post those materials along with many other background materials on our project website, metrotransit.org/FLine project. Folks can provide comment via email as well as phone. We'll be out in community, knocking on doors, meeting at community events, presenting to neighborhood groups, and distributing other materials similar to what we did in our draft corridor plan. Trying to reach as many Route 10 riders as we can, talking to as many station neighbors as we can so we know everyone is informed and able to provide input in the project. With that, again, Action 2023-60 is to authorize release of the Metro F-Line recommended corridor plan and public review and comment, and to direct staff to collect public comments through Sunday, May 14th, summarize comments, and report the findings to the Metropolitan Council. With that, I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jake and Katie. We've got several questions, so I'm going to try and catch around. First, start with Councilmember Tony Carter.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for the report. Could you please, I have a few questions, but they hopefully all tie together. Could you please share, there is a bus line running there now. What is that line?
Yeah, so the current service in the corridor is the Route 10.
Route 10. You also mentioned, and thank you for the work that you did, by the way, to be at tables, to create tables, to go out, walk the route, talk with neighbors and businesses and riders. And the good information that you receive back, I know, is helping to plan the best corridor. I wanted to know, you mentioned that there were concerns, and then you detailed those on the 7th and University area. But I didn't hear you say of other areas, or did I miss, was that the only area where there was a concern?
Chair Barber, council member, so there were other areas identified, but that example that I provided at Central and First Avenue/7th Street was where we heard the most feedback in opposition to the plan. And so it's provided today as an example, but the full recommended corridor plan, which is an attachment to the action today, details and responds to other locations.
Excellent. And so that's in our attachment here. Great. I also wanted to know if in the investigation that you did and the evaluation of other alternatives where you determined based upon those factors to go ahead with the alignment as it is, was there an assessment of, yes, there was. I didn't see it at the bottom here. There was an assessment of parking spaces that were lost. Was there an evaluation of how many parking spaces were actually available? You know, I know that 10% were lost in the first plan. Did we know how many were available during business hours, during peak business hours, and whether there would be no parking or whether there should still be certain spaces available?
Chair Barber, council member, we did not conduct a parking demand analysis, and we are simply reporting the estimated number of spaces that we think would be removed, and potentially some that would be added back in as a result of this, of the platform location.
And were there some that were added back in at that location? No, right. There were only lost at that location. Have you typically done a demand study of parking?
Chair Barber, Councilmember, we have not typically conducted an analysis of demand for parking. There are other projects occurring in this area that have conducted similar analyses, but not for the specific location that we're talking about.
What I do know is that, or what I would assume, is that, of course, the transportation enhancement that happens along the line would assist businesses, and so we're not simply reliant on parking, and that's a place to which we want to go, where we're more and more reliant, of course, on the transit opportunity that occurs. But I do ask those questions simply because when we might observe that businesses lose all of their parking, then there could be consideration for additional mitigation, and I don't know whether we would be pressed to that point in this project. But that's the basis of the question that I asked, and thank you for your responses. I'll look for more of that information. And finally, I am wondering, you did speak about the amount of feedback that came from, or input to the project, that came from white residents, or actually from responders. Could you share with me what percentage of the residents, businesses, riders you anticipate in that corridor would be white as compared to others, so that we can assess whether that feedback would match our expectation?
Chair Barber, Councilmember, I'm happy to. So fortunately, we have an onboard survey specific to where we can identify folks who are riding certain routes. On Route 10, based on a survey in 2021, we estimate about half of Route 10 riders are people of color. Approximately 1 in 5 identify as having a disability, and the vast majority have household incomes that are below our regional average.
And thank you. Those are questions I would have sought to hear back on as well. Were there special efforts to ensure that we received all of those categories and greater percentages in those areas?
Chair, Councilmember, we did try to target our engagement to folks who are historically underrepresented. Our survey was one of several tools in which we tried to do that. I think we placed emphasis on trying to be out at bus stops that are served by Route 10, talking to folks, posting materials there to try and make sure we're catching the most accurate picture of the folks who would be impacted by the change. I certainly would like to see, in terms of specific to race and ethnicity, that we get closer to representation of those that we found in our survey. And it's certainly something we'll be thinking about as we move forward into this next period.
I would
Ms.
appreciate
Roth, do you
that.
have something to add here? I wasn't sure you were trying to.
Thank you, Chair Barber. Councilmember, I wanted to just step back and address the question you had about parking previously. I think one thing Jake may have gone through rather quickly was that we did take a look at what percentage of the overall available on-street parking that did make up. That is in addition to a lot of off-street parking supply. We work very closely on each of these projects with the folks who manage the transportation right-of-way, the cities and counties who own the streets, and who make decisions about how curbside use for parking, loading, other things get allocated through here. So that's also a large part of arriving at these recommendations in part. I'll also note that a small amount of on-street parking impact is very common in these projects where we are introducing stations where either there's a bus stop and there's no parking there today, but it's moving to a new location in the future. And that is a large part of the engagement and focus. So we do spend a lot of time and attention in looking at, does it rise to the level of being something that needs to be, as you put it, mitigated. But by and large, this is an issue that is very consistent with past corridors.
Councilmember Carter, did you have additional questions?
The final question that I would ask, and thank you for all of the information that you both have provided, is whether we have sought in the past and consider the opportunity to, in the future, engagement of groups, organizations, who may have greater affinity to local residents in particular, so that as we seek to increase the engagement and input from those residents, we can perhaps have on-the-ground assistance.
Chair Barber, Councilmember, we, as part of our distribution of information about the project, we are definitely reaching out and communicating with groups who might focus on a certain subgroup, whether that's New Americans, people whose first language isn't English, to make sure that we are using those networks to share our information through them. In doing so, we're always offering an opportunity to meet with the project, for us to come out and meet folks where they're at, to provide that information. And I think that's a strategy we'll need to continue to do in this next phase.
Again, I do see the work that you have done to make sure that there's increased engagement, and I appreciate the strategies. I will continue to ask the questions about partnering with organizations in the community. Thank you.
And thank you for your questions and comments. One of the things that, with this sort of interim where it's going out for public comment, the official public comment period, even though we've been engaged a long way, it helps both frame questions, groups that they go to. It comes back to us as a formal public comment report, so we get a lot more detail with some of that. So, this is helpful for Katie and her team as we go back out to communities. There's a lot of questions, so I'm going to try and get through everybody. So give me a few minutes, but I think first one's Councilmember Pacheco.
Yes, Madam Chair, members, did we have any feedback, or have we heard from the city, particularly city council members from that area? I know we had a similar kind of station just about maybe 4 blocks away, and he thought it important enough to come in before the committee and ask that it be reviewed. And I don't know if we've heard anything else from the council members in the area.
Chair Barber, council member, we were able to connect with the council members in the city of Minneapolis and share F-line information through their newsletters. So the council member you're speaking to in the, I believe it's Ward 3, is aware of the F-line project, has shared our materials, and we have not heard any feedback from their office. I'll also add that we presented at several of the neighborhood groups within that council member's ward, including those very, directly adjacent to the F-line alignment, and have incorporated and heard their feedback as we're bringing it into this recommended corridor plan, but I've not heard specifically from the council member's office.
Madam Chair and Councilmember Pacheco, in addition, we do receive formal public comment, as you're aware, from the cities along the line. And so we do anticipate that the city of Minneapolis on this corridor will be bringing forward a comment letter in this phase of upcoming engagement through their committees and council.
Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is a fairly easy question, and I think I know the answer, but I've got to ask it anyway. With those 3 to 5 parking spaces, are any of them handicap parking?
Chair Barber, council member, no, they're not.
And would that be the case with the 3 other sites where there were concerns expressed? If there's parking lost with any of those sites, are we certain that we're not taking any handicap parking? I'm guessing that's a policy, but I just want to make sure.
Of the estimated on-street parking spaces that would be lost or moved by the, as part of the F-line project, none of them are identified as ADA parking spaces. I will say there is one ADA drop-off zone at one of our platform locations, and we are coordinating with the city of Minneapolis to move that drop-off zone. So it's not parking, it's just a drop-off to the adjacent street just around the corner.
Thank you.
And I'd also note as an element of these projects, the corners that are associated with our stations tend to have improvements in ADA accessibility built into as part of the project. So, all right, Councilmember Cameron.
Yeah, so I had two questions. One is kind of piggying back off of Councilmember Carter's comments, but first I wanted to ask, the enhancements to the stations, what does that look like? What does that entail? And because I think that helps us understand the impact on the communities that would be along the F line.
Madam Chair and Council Member, this is an image of a station on the C line that shows the small typical shelter. The blue marker on the left is called the pylon. On the other side of that, that faces the station itself, there's a real-time information screen. You can also see there are ticket machines, a fare card validator, there are heaters, lights installed on the shelter, and then security cameras and an emergency telephone also installed there. Further down the platform, you can see a bench. There are things like bike racks and lean railings that are a little more customized to the context that fits in. But these pieces that you see here are part of that standard kit of parts that are a consistent architecture that we use in the system for improved maintainability and for recognizable use by customers. The thing that does change from space to space is how large that shelter is. So in places like at Snelling and University, on the Green Line and A-Line connection, there's a larger shelter there to accommodate the customers. But the architecture and the general layout remains the same.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. So I think this is really exciting because this is a major corridor for our new American communities, new immigrant and refugee communities. It plays a significant role for those communities. Here in the Metro, it's one of our richest in terms of cultural diversity, particularly around that Central Avenue corridor and then moving up into some of the suburban areas. I just really want to emphasize some of the points that Councilmember Carter made about really reaching out to those businesses. There's a lot of small business owners who may be limited English proficient or who are limited English proficient along that corridor. There are also a lot of religious centers, Islamic centers along that corridor that we really want to make sure are included in that process, and that includes maybe providing some of the materials. If you send out postcards, send them out in multiple languages as well, and the survey work reflecting the diversity of that community that this could serve, because I think it's also an opportunity not only to improve services for current ridership, but bring in a lot more riders who could utilize these services that live along that corridor or our customers along that corridor, and also to employees in that corridor as well. So I'm really excited about the work that you're doing, and I would encourage digging even deeper into some of those opportunities around engaging with those diverse communities there.
And I'll just, I completely agree with that. I will say that this ABRT team has really done a lot of that. I think they're really setting the example for even how we do a bunch of other things at council. Doesn't mean we can't always find new ways to do things, but especially as we move into, like right now, sort of the locations of things, but the actual design and how it's going to fit into the neighborhood, how it's going to impact businesses on those corners and things like that. There's a lot of very direct community engagement with some of these things, which is also, I think, why we see a big jump in ridership once these projects come online. So, but yeah, if any suggestions are all welcome. Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also really excited about the Metro F line. I think that it's going to serve those communities well. It's in like 4 of the cities that I represent, and plus Minneapolis and Blaine. So it's definitely a project that I'm close to. And I'm really, as folks that know me know, that I'm very supportive of engagement and doing that in creative ways and seeing if we can increase the engagement across all of the different customer bases, whether it be the disability base or the New American base or BIPOC base. We've learned a lot, and I can see that we're starting to incorporate that into our engagement. And if we were to look back we would see improvements, but there is a lot more that can be done. So I'm glad to see that. And that the parking demand analysis or even the business analysis prior to development, during the construction, I know that's already handled in these projects, but even afterwards is important too, because it's possible that their business could increase, therefore they need more parking in the future. So looking at that, I think is really important in terms of our process. So it's a process question, as Chair Barber said, that can be applied to other projects. So I'm glad to hear that the council members are asking these questions as well.
All right, additional questions or comments? Councilmember Pacheco.
Madam Chair, just a quick comment. I've been on 2 site visits where there was some controversy over a location, and staff were very well. I thank them for coming out and showing me what was what and get my orientation. Sometimes you look on the paper and you think you've got it, but when you start walking around the site, and so they've been very good at showing up. So if any one of you want to go look at some of these things, doesn't take long. It was summer then, but anyway, it was summer, so it was a nice day. But I was able to see how exactly that fit into my neighborhood.
I appreciate those comments. It goes back to the earlier discussion of, going out and actually seeing some of these things. Is we will always have comments and from on these plans where we're putting different things, but we're always very willing to go out to the communities, whether it's as council members or our staff, to go talk about it, look at it, talk with the locals, because that's really how you see how some of these things will fit into the neighborhoods or not. So, all right. Any additional questions or comments? You guys ask great questions, I've got to say that. So with that, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-60.
Chair, I make a motion to approve.
Moved by Councilmember Chambliss and seconded by Councilmember Pacheco. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. We're on to business item 2023-69, which is for the Metro Green Line Extension Civil Construction Change Order Authority. We have Jim Alexander here to present.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Jim Alexander. Nice to meet new council members tonight. I'm the project director for the Green Line Extension. And so this business item is related to seeking additional authority. And before I get into the actual item itself, I thought I'd provide a little background, particularly to the new members. Council policy, whenever a contract is awarded, construction contract, there's a procurement policy that allows change orders to be made up to 10% of the original value before going to council. If we need to go over to 11% or whatever, we have to come to you all for that approval to go above that 10%. So what this item is doing is seeking that additional authority. Now, we have gone before the council, previous council members, twice to increase that authority, and I thought I'd walk that through with you all to give you some history on what's going on with the contract here. I think we have a PowerPoint here. I think Nick Thompson gave you an overview of the project and talked about the different contracts. We're talking about the civil construction contract specifically, and this is a contract that was awarded back in 2018 and to Linda McCrossan. And they are actively working on the project. We're over 75% complete on this project, but the challenge is we still have a lot to do, and specifically with the Kenilworth Tunnel you've heard about before you've been in the council, and you'll hear a lot about as we proceed through here. Initial contract value was just under $800 million, and we have issued change orders up to about $237 million up through in March of 2023. You can get an idea of the scope of work. A lot of structures on this project, and be glad to take you on a tour if you'd like to do that later this spring when we get a little clearing of the snow and kind of show you what's been built and what still needs to be done. So in terms of the history of this change order authority, and again, this isn't for a specific change order per se, but it's seeking additional authority so we can issue change orders. And what we are looking to do is do this kind of a yearly basis, and so we're looking to get authority through what we have forecasted up through 23. We anticipate that we'll be back, but we'll assess that toward the end of this year to see what kind of needs we'll have as we move into 24. But to give you some perspective, the original authority amount was just under 80 million. Again, so that's 10% of the original contract amount of, so 79, almost $80 million at 10% there. In 2021, we sought authority to raise 10.33%, and that was specifically to the corridor protection that had to be put in place along the BNSF corridor on the eastern part of the project. So that brought the total authority up to 20.33% or 162 million. We later in 21 we sought additional authority of another 76 million or just under 10% to bring that total amount of authority to 238 million or 29.82. So tonight we're seeking to add 3.49% or just under 28 million for what we forecast for change order needs beyond our current authorization of that 29.82. So that would bring us up to the 33.31% total authority. And we're looking at change orders, kind of categories. We're looking at unforeseen conditions. That could be maybe a good example of that, where the plans initially said the groundwater was going to be at X level, and when the contractor started excavating, it was 2 feet higher or 3 feet higher. That's going to cost additional money to deal with that groundwater because they have to get rid of the groundwater to build the foundation, for example, or draw it down. Another area is freight rail maintenance. We are required to maintain the freight tracks. There's about just under 8 miles of freight tracks we're running alongside. About 3/4 of that, the contractor is responsible for maintaining that. And so there's a change order through an allowance that will be required. Another area is piling. We still have a number of piles, just over 400 piles to do out at Southwest Station to complete. And if the pile needs to go deeper, this is for the deep foundation to support the structures. If it needs to go deeper, that'll be additional costs that would be carried through a change order. And then finally, tunnel-related issues. That's going to be probably a good portion of this need as we see walking through 23. We do have one item just coming up. You've probably heard about the impediment we had encountered near the Cedar Isles condominium building. Well, the impediment is now removed, but because of that, we've had to do some modifications to the tunnel wall itself, and so there's going to be a change order associated with that we anticipate encountering later this spring. So with all these, this brings that authority request up to 266 million. And I would just add that these costs are included in what we had forecasted. We talked about an estimated budget of 2.7 billion back in January of last year, and these costs would be encompassed within that. So we don't see to increase that estimated budget at this time. And so I will maybe get into the action item itself and take any questions. So. Madam Chair, council members, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council authorize an additional 3.49% or 27.9 million to the 29.82% or 238.5 million cumulative change order authority for contract 15P307A with London Crossing joint venture, resulting in a total amount of 33.31% or 266.4 million cumulative change order authority. So with that, Madam Chair, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Before I turn it over for questions, would you mind just doing a high-level walkthrough of what happens, how change orders move through? Because there are some that will come before the committee and some that won't.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So the current policy, if I have this right, I've got the procurement director back here to support me. If there's an individual change order that's over 2.5 million, we come to this body to get that approval. Anything underneath that has certain specific change order signature authority, so it depends on what that level. Ultimately, it goes to Leslie Conderas, general manager, and then Mary Bogie as regional administrator. Beyond that, it would have to come up to you folks. Other change orders that are just under 2.5, that's handled through a staff level signature process.
Yeah. Chair Barber, council members, Jody Jacoby, procurement director. Mr. Alexander is correct. The only thing additional that's required with the policy is that the project manager and the business unit additionally needs to complete a sole source form to authorize why this contractor and for this contract, why it's imperative and we can't have any other contractor do the work. So in addition to the signature authority, the other initiating document that's really important is justification of a sole source to keep the work with the existing contractor. And as Jim mentioned also, the construction signature authority is any contract value greater than $10 million needs to come through the Committee of Origin, and that's why we're here today at the Transportation Committee. And any contract amendments that are over 10 million, and every contract has a 10% allowance. So if it's 10 million plus an additional more than 10%, then it needs to come back through the Committee of Origin in the form of a business item.
See, nice and simple. Yeah, Councilmember Cameron.
Okay. I have another question that, the more details you give, the more questions I have, I guess. So if in the in the contracting process, is there a ceiling for change items that triggers a competitive bidding process for change item requests?
Madam Chair, Council Member, every change order is looked at individually, and so we work with the project staff to get the details of each unique change, and certainly mobilization, some of the unique items that Jim referenced all come into play to ensure that we not only have the right contractor doing the job, but we're not paying to remobilize. Or if there is some existing work, we definitely want to have the contractor that started that work completed.
Yeah, I would add to that, just let's take the quarter protection wall, for example. We did look at, could we contract this separately? And due to the confinement of the work site and just what is going on with the work itself, it really wasn't feasible for another contractor to come in and do the work because it's all tied together in terms of that quarter protection and our guideway. But it is something we assess, particularly on the larger cost items. Is there a better way to do this, cheaper way to do it? We're always looking at opportunities.
Okay, go ahead. And then, so you mentioned some of the unforeseen conditions. I wanted clarity. Are those the change item? Are those actual conditions that I know? It wasn't clear to me whether some of them were examples, or it sounded like perhaps the piling and the tunnel-related issue, the tunnel impediment, were actually going to be funded using this change item. So can you clarify that?
Yes, Madam Chair, Council Member. Yes, unforeseen conditions, it's like that example I gave. If our plan set that was bid upon said the groundwater was going to be at 10 foot below the ground surface and it ended up being 5 foot below the ground surface, that's going to be additional cost for the contractor to do that work if they have to get down and remove the water to do a foundation, for example. And so that would be that example of unforeseen. The piling is still kind of an unforeseen, but it's more specific to if the piling was supposed to be going down, anticipated down to 100 feet below the ground surface and end up being driven down to 120 feet, that extra 20 feet would need to be compensated somehow through a change order. So that would be a difference. So it's still kind of an unforeseen, but that's specific to piling. With the tunnel, we have the example I gave is with the impediment, we still had to take that out, but we had to narrow up the tunnel wall because we still had to get around some parts of the building, and so that's going to cost additional monies. So that's kind of a specific item that still really kind of unforeseen, but it's more specific to the tunnel. I don't know if that helps too.
Yeah, I guess I apologize. I'm not tracking. So if they are unforeseen conditions, I guess I just want clarity as to how, isn't that included in the original budgeting process? Or, it seems like it's additional funding for, anytime you undertake a major construction project, you want additional funds just in case, kind of like a rainy day fund. And so I just want clarity as to how, was there already an allocation for unforeseen conditions, and then this is an additional allocation, and why is there this additional change item needed.
Sure, Madam Chair, Councilmember, I think I can describe
Yeah.
it this way. The overall project, as I indicated, we have an estimated budget of $2.7 billion. So within that, there's a contingency amount.
Yeah.
Within the specific civil construction contract, it's a specified amount. In this case, it started at just $800 million. And if it didn't have those things in there, then we need to do a change order to add to that contract value. So that would come from the overall project. So it's really from contingency. And our challenge is we've gone over the additional, the authority that we've received from the council previously, so we need to increase that authority on that contract specifically. So there are monies in the overall project to pay for that. It just, we need that authority to, additional authority to add it to the contract. Does that help?
Yeah, that is. Thank you for that.
Okay, Councilmember Chambliss.
Well, thank you. That was a good explanation. I see on the presentation, page 2, that it says that the change orders had totaled about $237 million as of March 8th. And so this proposed action would request an additional $28 million about on page 3. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, maybe that helps to clarify as well. And then I'm wondering if you can explain a little bit more about some of the particular change order examples. For example, the corridor protection barrier. How did that come about? Is that a normal expense that we have during construction? Maybe explaining that. And then the secant wall, when we had a change order for that, or even, well, I'll just stop with that for my first question, and then I'll have a second one.
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilmember. Well, let's talk about the corridor protection barrier first. So this was a requirement from BNSF. They run along our line for about 1.4 miles. And after we awarded the contract, the civil construction contract to Lynn McCrossan, we made an agreement with BNSF to extend a corridor protection wall about 1.1 miles. And so this change order that we added, it's essentially 82.6, which we added that additional authority to add into the civil construction contract. So it wasn't part of the bid plans when we went out for bid, and it was added later. So it was a requirement of BNSF to be in the project, and so we had to put it in. And this is the case where we did look at another contractor to see if we could do that separately, and it just really wasn't feasible. And so we ended up doing a change order in the civil construction contract. So maybe I'll pause there, and I can talk secant if there's questions about the corridor protection.
I was asking the question for their purposes so they would have the background information. I already knew that answer. So.
Maybe I could talk about the secant wall. So the secant wall is we have about a half-mile long of tunnel in the Kenilworth corridor in Minneapolis, and I'm sure you've read any papers out there, you know all about it. We originally had intended to support the excavation with sheet piles, and that's essentially corrugated sheet piles, and these sheet piles go down about 65 feet into the ground. The excavation overall is about 40 feet deep, and the challenge is we're about 20 feet into the groundwater. And so the other challenge is we can't dewater in this area because there's concern of settlement around the tunnel area because we have residential structures right close by. So we experienced challenges getting the sheet piles in. We had experienced some settlement up to about 4 or 5 inches of settlement at the ground surface when we were putting the sheets in. And so as a result of that, we decided to go to a different method because we're going right next to this Cedar Isles condominium, and we'll take you on a tour to show you what it's really looking like because I don't think you can appreciate it until you actually see it. So we decided to come up with another method for this support excavation because essentially we're trying to create a barrier, if you will, so we can dig inside to build the tunnel. And so the secant wall is kind of an accumulation of concrete cylinders that are drilled down to that 65 or 64 foot depth. And it's just a continuous wall of concrete piles. Every other pile has a concrete beam and it's just a steel beam going down the middle of it. That is a more stout supportive excavation than the sheet piles, and it really eliminated or much reduced the settlement that was occurring, which we needed to do because we're going right next to that building. And so we had to add add to the civil contract a change order to do that work. In this case, we really needed the same contractor doing this work because it's all integrated. And so that was the tune of just under 30 million. So that was part of that second authorization increase. So a lot of complexities, again, probably really good to show you out on the site what these things look like.
And also, I would just follow up too. I know there've been a couple of council members reach out already for some more background on this project because of where it's at. We're very much obviously in the thick of things right now. And so we'll make sure we get that set up and also probably bring some more information items back to the committee because it is a complex project and there's a lot going on. So, but we're very lucky. We've got Mr. Alexander, who's a great history. Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, I would say, like, for the future, if you could have some visuals, like, if you're gonna describing a secant wall and actually seeing one, you know, it becomes like much more, I'm a very visual person, and it kind of brings it alive, and I can see, you know, okay, you have a concrete series of barriers, and then show me what you originally intended, and then, and it's really clear, you know, and so I understand what you're doing, but I think it's even better in the future if you're gonna have, particularly when you're dealing with engineering concepts, if you could actually see a picture of what's going along, to go along with the
Totally
information.
agree, and actually I could take a step to show you some previous presentations we've done to show what the sheet pile looks like and how it moved to secant. We've got some good illustrations to show that. We could share that with this body.
Okay.
All right. Additional questions, comments? Councilmember Drakak.
Is there currently a process or policy in place to inform Hennepin County for change order like this, or to seek their consent? Are we required to?
Madam Chair, Council Member, we have a policy that we have a process with the county. It's called an Executive Change Control Board. And anytime there's use of contingency over $350,000, we seek approval from that body. And we meet on pretty much a monthly basis, and we go over all change orders with that body as well. We don't necessarily seek this. This is more of a council process to seek that authority level. But the ECCB really sees all change orders, and they approve anything over $350,000 worth of contingency use.
And I would say also, so there's 2 council members, so it's the chair and myself, and 3 Hennepin County commissioners who sit on the ECCB who approve those change control orders. We also review kind of the history over the month, even the ones that don't hit thresholds, but then we can ask questions on specific ones throughout. And we have very active participants, both from the council and Hennepin County on that board.
So just a point of clarification, does this go to ECCB first before it gets to our stage for approval?
Madam Chair, Council Members, this does not. This is only a council policy. We're not seeking any authority to spend any money. We're just seeking authority to have that level raised because we don't have specific items we're bringing to you today. It's just more that authority level. So any change orders that fall under this authority level will again go to that ECCB. Anything that's over $350,000 of contingency use, we would seek their authority to spend those monies on that particular change order.
So for some of the big change orders, they will go to both ECCB and then through the council and to the full council. So there's several steps along the way.
Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions, comments? Go ahead, Councilmember Cameron.
I did have one additional, and that is the contractor, McCrossin, Linda McCrossin, is that, how long what parts of the project are they responsible for?
They're responsible, flashback to this slide here. All that scope of work they're responsible for. So we have 14.5 miles of LRT track. There's about 6 miles of freight track they're rebuilding. All the stations, 16 stations, there's 44 structures. In terms of the bridges, you can see the layout there. We have 29 new bridges or LRT, LRT, pedestrian, roadway, freight bridges along the project. We have seven bridges that we're doing modifications to, and there's 8 pedestrian tunnels. There's 2 cut and cover LRT tunnels. One goes under Highway 62. The other one we've talked about. Let's see, 121 retaining walls that measure from short 4 foot high to 20+ foot high retaining walls along the project. And again, the 14.5 miles. And we're also responsible for, contractors responsible for reestablishing the trails along the Bass Lake and the Cedar Lake, South Cedar Lake Trail and the Kenilworth Trail.
The other contract you hear a lot about is the systems contract.
Yes, Madam Chair, there's a systems contract. I think Nick Thompson ran over that last week. That's Aldrich Parsons joint venture, and they're responsible for really all the things that make things run. So they bring the power to the system. It's the communication pieces, the overhead catenary system, the lines that are over top of the tracks there. So they're really the follow-on contractor that kind of connects everything together and makes it work.
All right, additional questions, comments? Councilmember Carter?
Yeah, this is pretty quick, and you can make certain that I'm just tracking here as well as I possibly can. As I look at the changes that were requested already and the notes to the left that describe how those funds were used, should I be assuming that the funds requested, that additional authorization is all used up? For example, that last 10%, are there additional funds there? We don't have to go to pennies, but are there additional funds there, or are these new funds starting from zero?
Right, Madam Chair, Council members, it seems like the answer this way. We have about a little over $1 million worth left of the authority we've been authorized with, so that's why we're coming here to seek that additional authority.
Well, I appreciate the planning, yes, and it's interesting. Thank you very much.
Additional questions, comments? All right, I'd entertain a motion then to approve business item 2023-69. Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Now we are on to our final business item for the night, which is business item 2023-71, which is the 2023 Unified Planning Work Program Amendment 1. And we have Amy Vennewitz here.
Madam Chair and members, Amy Vennewitz, Deputy Director of MTS for Transportation Planning. And I am here tonight to present the item titled 2023 Transportation Unified Planning Work Program Amendment Number 1. Oops. And I'm confused. There we go. The Unified Planning Work Program, otherwise affectionately known as the UPWP, is one of 4 federally required transportation planning documents. And this is an amendment to the 2023 document. Because it's federally required under our federal planning law, that's why it is in front of you today. The other 3 planning documents that are required under federal law are the Transportation Policy Plan, or TPP, the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP, and the Transportation Public Participation Plan. All of these documents will be in front of you at some point during the next 4 years. The UPWP is adopted on an annual basis and describes the transportation planning work that we expect to accomplish over the next over the next calendar year. So why is an amendment needed? So typically we prepare annually the UPWP in the summer prior to the calendar year that we're adopting it for. And so that would have been last July and August. And then we bring the document through our tab and TAC and then to the council for full adoption, usually in early October. And at that point in time, we're late in the year, but we still have a number of projects that might be still under procurement. They might be still being scoped, or they might just be getting underway, so we're not quite sure what the typical schedule is going to be for those projects. So the primary purpose of this amendment is really to catch up with where we ended 2022 with all of our planning projects in terms of the project scope, schedule, and budget. So a little bit of perspective of how the UPWP and its planning studies fit in our overall planning work. Typically, what you will see, and the picture on the left-hand side here is our 2040 Transportation Policy Plan. And as we're doing the Transportation Policy Plan work, we often find issues, problems, technical data, that type of thing that need additional study. And so as part of the Transportation Policy Plan, we have a chapter labeled Work Program, and that work program enumerates the studies that we'll be doing over the next 4 to 5 years. And then as we do the annual UPWP documents, we put the studies in there along with the scope, budget, and schedule. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold here. Then as the studies proceed, we get results, we get findings, and then we either come back and amend those results into the Transportation Policy Plan, or in the case of the current work, most of the recommendations and findings will appear in the next Transportation Policy Plan, the 2050 plan, which we are currently working on. So that's the overall context of the UPWP. As I mentioned, the primary purpose of this amendment is to adjust some of the work tasks that are in the UPWP, thank you, and then also the budget and schedules. On this slide, I'm not going to go through the individual projects themselves, but you can see we have a number of planning studies where we are either adding funding to the study to accomplish additional tasks, we are extending the end date of the study, or overall just adjusting the schedule. What I would mention about each of these studies, I'm happy to answer any questions about them today, but as the work proceeds, as we get under contract and have work ongoing, all of them will come in front of you at some point in the future, usually towards the end of the study as we're reaching final recommendations. We'll bring the overall study in front of you, talk about the process, talk about the findings and recommendations, and then maybe most importantly, talk about how we're going to move into action or results from the studies themselves. As part of this amendment, we are adding in 4 new studies that we did not originally anticipate doing when we started creating the UPWP last summer in July and August. So I'll go through each of those studies briefly. The first study is the Electric Vehicle Public Engagement and City Support. I will say oftentimes we don't get the most succinct titles for these. So this study is really a continuation of work that MnDOT is already doing. MnDOT does have a contractor who is working with cities throughout the state. And what we are finding is that one of the best ways to really promote electric vehicles is to work through the cities. The cities put out promotional materials, they host educational events. Oftentimes at these events, they actually let people drive electric vehicles or practice charging the vehicles. And so in order to get more of these events in the metro area, we are going about our own procurement. We expect to have 6 to 8 of these type of engagements with cities that will come to us interested in hosting them. So that is the first study. The Regional Stops Model Update is a very technical study. In 2022, we conducted what is known as the Transit Onboard Survey, where we survey all riders across the transit system for things like demographics, purpose of travel, origin, destination, and it gives us a lot of travel data. This project will be putting that data into a travel model so that we can use it to predict transit ridership in the future. The third study, Regional Solicitation Engagement Tool. You will be hearing a lot in the future about the regional solicitation, the process where we allocate federal funds to local projects. One of the things that is happening is we have moved up the schedule for the 2024 regional solicitation so that that solicitation will actually be released this fall rather than next year in 2024. As part of moving up that schedule, we are adding this engagement tool into 2023 too. This is a process where a consultant will actually develop an online survey tool for our partners and also the general public to give us feedback on how to spend the federal money across modes and across project purposes. And then the last new project here is related to the Transportation Policy Plan update. We will be getting a consultant to help us develop infographics. We've gotten a lot of feedback. If you haven't looked at the policy plan, it's very long and very dense, and we've gotten feedback that we need methods for people to better be able to see our messaging and get it much more condensed and shorter. And so we're hoping that getting some help both with the editing and developing infographics will help us do that. So that's our 4 new studies. As part of this amendment, we are only adding in local funding, not any new federal funding. So in this case, we were originally matched at 20%. I think with these new funds, the match will now be between 22 to 23%, I believe, and that will allow us to keep the federal funds at the 5.1 million. So the action we are requesting today is that the Metropolitan Council adopt the proposed amendment to the 2023 Unified Planning Work Program as shown in the document titled 2023 Transportation Unified Planning Work Program for the Twin Cities Metropolitan Area Amendment 1. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Amy. Councilmember Dolkar.
So I'm curious about how the federal guidance around Justice 40 and that type of funding and implementation looks like, and I'm happy to hold that conversation if this is not the right timing to ask.
Madam Chair and Council Member, I think this is probably not quite the document. So the Justice 40 talks about, it's a federal requirement as we invest transportation funds to assure that 40% of the benefits realized from the funding go to underserved populations. And we have been waiting for the federal government a little bit to help us understand how they're going to be measuring that and what the expectations are around that. The primary document that we use to guide our regional transportation investments is the Transportation Policy Plan. So the 2050 update to the Transportation Policy Plan, which you're going to be hearing a lot about over the next 2 years, that would be the primary document where we would be asked to demonstrate adherence to Justice 40.
Thank you.
And I'll be reaching out to a couple of you too. We've got a work group for the TPP that had a lot of turnover. And so, yeah, if anyone's specifically interested, we have to limit it because we can't have a quorum. And, but if you're interested, let me know. And because it is where we really embed a lot of these, the real, I think the meat of what we're doing and how we want to guide our investments. So, all right, Councilmember Chambliss.
Yes. So my question is about the regional stops model update for the transit forecasting and how that coordinates with our travel demand criteria. In other words, what is our intention and use for the revised forecasting? What can we anticipate now that we are quote unquote post-pandemic and there have been some changes in the way that our models have been affected and the way that people are getting around in transportation. I'm curious to know because if there is a reduction in the use of transportation, which would get reflected in the revised forecast, then how would that affect our travel demand criteria? if we have excess capacity as a result of the revised forecast, could we tweak our travel demand criteria so that we could meet some unmet needs that maybe weren't met before because, you know, we were already at capacity and didn't have any more, but now if we do, then should we be looking at, for example, geographic transportation modes, geographic equity, and how we're doing that? I know that's come up a lot with our council members and how we can better serve the suburbs, particularly those suburban areas that have high concentrated areas of poverty that happen to be very closely aligned with the folks that are marginalized in, racially marginalized in those areas as well. So I'd like to see if there's, you know, the potential with revised forecasting to coordinate efforts so that we can meet more objectives, perhaps.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, I'm going to give this a shot, but so we have more than two, but we have a system-wide travel model that we call Activity Sim, and that models the highway and the transit system at the very highest level. And the inputs for that model are from what is known as the Travel Behavior Inventory, which my staff conducts, the TBI. And every 2 years, we go out and we survey 7,500 households from across the region, and they take a travel survey for a whole week on your cell phone, and you input your mode of travel, where you're going, purposes, and you have to do the whole household. So we have been doing that on a rolling basis for the past, decades. We used to do it every 10 years. Now we're doing it every 2 years. And that feeds into our regional travel model. So that regional travel model is really the tool that we use to do what I would call trade-offs in system investments. We can model different land use patterns, we can model different transportation systems, and we can see the differences in how that affects usage across the system. So that model, that work is ongoing, and you will see different modeling results as part of the Transportation Policy Plan. The STOPS model is what I would call a very specific model. We use it to look at specific project type forecasts for ridership. So it's not a system, it's really a corridor, it's a smaller geographic level. And the reason this one is actually appearing here, I believe, is to model, we need to use the inputs for the purple line forecasts, which are being updated, and I think that's about as far as I can go with that one.
Director Krause.
Madam Chair, I'll just chime in a bit here. So STOPS is, it stands for Simplified Trips on Project Software. It's a tool that FTA generates and then makes available for regions to build out with their onboard survey results. So onboard survey of transit customers has occurred, and the data is being analyzed, and then we would, through the project that's proposed in this, create the local implementation of that FTA STOPS model for projects to use, so that consultants are using a unified model across different projects. And the reason that it's important to develop that is, the current model is based on a 2016 survey, and will quickly reach the point where FTA, while they have continued to accept 2019 basis ridership so far, we expect that in the coming years they'll switch that to requiring a more current ridership. So in order to obtain a accepted forecast and ultimately to receive a very large construction grant from the FTA, the use of that tool is really a key step in getting the rating that justifies that eventual award.
Okay, additional questions or comments? All right, seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-71.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Carter, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Delker. Is any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Amy. So as we talked last time, now we decide kind of what goes non-consent versus consent. I would say the first two items should go non-consent so we can present some information to our other council members on ABRT systems and the Green Line. But the third item can go on the consent agenda if everyone agrees. Okay, very good. All right, we are on to information, and we have Metro Transit 2023 Strategic Plan Overview, and we have Acting General Manager Leslie Canderas and Selena Martina here to present.
Thank you, Chair Barber and committee members. We're here to provide an overview of Metro Transit's strategic operations plan. And this is really a two-part presentation, and the first of 4 presentations we intend to provide this committee this year. So today we'll step back and provide an overview of what our strategic plan is, how it fits and aligns with other plans the council has. And then we're going to provide our quarterly update. And as you'll hear, we have 4 goals and 4 core elements that comprise our strategic plan. So our plan this year is to bring an update on 1 goal and 1 core element each quarter, just to keep you abreast of the work we're doing and the progress we're making. So just as a starting place, our strategic plan is called our Stronger, Better Strategic Plan. And I spoke a little bit about this a few weeks ago when we were covering the first term accomplishments in front of the council. But the history of this strategic plan really traces back to mid-2020. We were in the throes of the pandemic. A vaccine was not yet available. We were several months away from that. Our region had just experienced the murder of George Floyd and unrest that followed after that horrific event. It was a really uncertain time, and within Metro Transit, our general manager really challenged his leadership team to think about how do we move forward as a stronger, better transit agency and not simply set our goal to return to what was before. So that's really the thrust of this plan, and as we look at the goals and core elements, it's really our attempt to try to articulate what that direction, what that vision looks like. When we started the plan and really throughout the plan, we pulled on what we had heard over the years, and especially in recent years, from our customers, from our employees, from our community, and really tried to think about what we know people value in Metro Transit and our work, and use that to really center what we view as our path forward. As I mentioned on this slide, our intent is not to duplicate other documents. Rather, this is more to operationalize a lot of the direction that the council provides us. For example, I know at this week's Committee of the Whole meeting, the council will be talking about the Metropolitan Council's strategic plan. We definitely took the current document into account as we were developing our strategic plan. It also really builds on the outcomes and principles of Thrive MSP 2040, elements of the transportation, or the TPP, the Transportation Policy Plan. So this document isn't meant to duplicate work that's already out there, but rather this is how we kind of bring it in within Metro Transit to really guide our work. This slide is the 4 goals, and again, I'm not going to really go into depth in each goal tonight because you will hear more in-depth presentations in the quarters to come. Just in terms of process, the way we've structured the creation and implementation of our strategic plan is for each goal and for each core element, we have an executive sponsor who's responsible for really coordinating efforts across the Metro Transit division that help further the particular goal or core element. So kind of our process this year will be to have those executive sponsors come before you and really speak to the work that they're leading and coordinating. As you can see, these 4 goals are really about what we, again, are striving for and committing to our region that we will do to become a stronger, better transit system. So the first goal is we provide service that is resilient, reliable, and easy to use. Some of the work that's happening in this goal includes our Network Now project. We provided an overview of Network Now back in January, but I think we should bring a revised update and overview of that project, given we have new members here. But Network Now is really our planning effort and community engagement effort to design our network as it should be now. So really looking at the short term, about the next 5 years as the horizon of that. And the idea is to really recognize both that travel behavior has changed, people's needs and interests in transit have changed, and also our constraints have changed. Operator availability and workforce issues have led us to reduce service beyond where we would choose to do so based on where we think demand is coming back. So the Network Now project is really a big piece of this first goal, to go out and understand from our customers and communities what their values and interests are in transit now. And right now we're in the first wave of engagement on that that will help us shape the decision-making framework that then will help us make service decisions further down the line. Goal 2 is the goal that I'll speak on tonight. We provide service that's safe, welcoming, and comfortable. I'm the executive sponsor of our Goal 2, which is also the same as our Safety and Security Action Plan, so we'll come back to that in a minute. Goal 3 is we are a great place to work and build a career. Some of the work happening in this goal includes our Great Workplace Project, which is an organizational development project that we started back in the fall of 2021. And we started out by really gathering input and feedback from across Metro Transit, from our frontline workers to our frontline supervisors, all the way up to the leadership teams, to get a sense of how we are a good workplace now, but where there are areas to improve and grow and become truly great. So some of that work is in goal, or I should say all of that work is in goal 3. Also in goal 3 includes our work to improve our current workforce levels. For example, all the work that's happening to increase operator hiring and retention, and again, help relate it to goal 1, allow us to provide more service. And goal 4 is we make our region more environmentally sustainable. So work in here in this goal includes, for example, continued implementation of their zero emissions bus transition plan. That was a plan that the council adopted in 2022. The short-term goal is to have 20% of our 40-foot bus purchases be electric purchases now through 2027. Other elements of goal 4 include work to make sure our facilities are truly modern and are using current technologies that allow us to save energy and reduce our environmental footprint. And then our core elements are structured much like our goals, but they're called core elements because these are really practices and behaviors and really habits of how we do our work that we feel need to be woven through everything we do, our goals, but also our daily work. So the first core element you're going to hear from Selena Martina tonight is we meaningfully advance equity inside our organization and in the region. Core element 2 is we effectively communicate and engage with customers, stakeholders, and employees. So looking both at ways we do community engagement, but also how we provide transit information and really make sure it's truly accessible and inclusive to all people who are interacting with our system. Core element 3, we evaluate our performance and foster innovation for continuous improvement. Some of the work happening with this core element includes really refreshing our key performance indicators within Metro Transit that we review as a directors group to make sure we're monitoring the right indicators of performance to guide our decision making. And core element 4 is we are responsible stewards of a transformative and financially sustainable transit system. So this is work that often resides within our finance department, but really looks at how we consider things such as the life cycle costs of projects we're building, so not just what something costs, but what the capital maintenance tails are of that work and so forth. So again, that was a really high-level look at our 4 goals, 4 core elements, and as part of our quarterly updates, you'll hear from each of the executive sponsors more in depth on those. Tonight, wearing the hat of the executive sponsor for the second goal, we provide service that's safe, welcoming, and easy to use. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I've talked about this, including last week 2 weeks ago at the Transportation Committee meeting before you took up the supplemental security contract. But mainly what I wanted to share with this committee tonight is when we talk about the Safety and Security Action Plan, it's synonymous with Goal 2 of our strategic plan. So again, we're not trying to duplicate plans. It's really nested within this broader strategic plan document. As I've mentioned to you all before, the Safety and Security Action Plan was really the culmination of a couple years of work. It started with Chair Zelli's call to review the police department shortly after the murder of George Floyd. That led to the council contracting with the Citizens League to do extensive community engagement and customer engagement. That work then transitioned to a second phase led by Councilmember Chambliss that brought together a work group of council members to really digest and synthesize what came out of the Citizens League work and supplement it with other information, other research, other feedback to end up with a set of direction and recommendations. And then the Safety and Security Action Plan is kind of the third piece of this, which is an actual document that was generated by Metro Transit staff, taking in that direction from the council work group and doing our best to figure out how we could really operationalize that. And so it resulted. Right now, we have 40 action items. We might add a few more before we come to you for our Q1 update in May. But they're organized around these three areas of work: improving conditions on the system. So that includes, how do we invest and ensure we have presence on the system? It includes a lot of the work led by our engineering and facilities department to make sure our facilities are clean and well-maintained and we have lighting in the shelters that have highest boarding, and we're installing public art, which we know helps create a sense of community in our spaces, which can deter problematic behavior. Also often helps deter things like graffiti. So improving conditions on our system is really a multifunctional set of work that is meant to provide a better experience to our customers. Training and supporting employees is really about kind of internal facing work we do to make sure our frontline employees especially have training in resiliency, have access to peer support when something tragic happens to them on the system or they experience a really difficult situation. And then finally, this engaging customers and partners area of work is really where we look at opportunities to partner with community groups, in some cases contracting with community-based organizations, looking at law changes such as the administrative citation for fair noncompliance legislation that we're supporting at the Capitol this session and have been since 2019. So, again, the idea of the action plan is it's really Metro Transit's attempt to inventory the things we feel we can have strong influence over. At the same time, we recognize that we're embedded in our communities, and many of the challenges we're seeing especially will rely on us expanding that third area of work, how we're partnering with people outside of our organization to really get to some of the systemic causes of those issues. Finally, before I turn it over to Selena, I'll just mention that as part of the council endorsing this plan back in June of 2022, you required us to come to you quarterly with updates, and our next quarterly update will be on May 3rd, unless the schedule changes for some reason, but that's where we're currently penciled in. So part of why I wanted to provide this update tonight is just to let you know that you will be hearing more about the Safety and Security Action Plan throughout the year. And those presentations are coupled with presentations by our Chief of Police. One of the bits of feedback we gathered when we were developing the plan is there's a lot of interest in council members having an opportunity to speak directly to our Chief of Police. And one of many venues we're trying to make that happen is these quarterly updates. And we also provide this information on our website. So I have the website link for our public safety page. Additionally, on our performance measurement page, which is metrotransit/performance, we provide safety and security data there as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Selena Martina to talk about core element 1.
Thank you, Leslie. Chair Barber, committee members, welcome to council members. I'm Selena Martinez, Senior Manager of Equity and Inclusion at Metro Transit. I use she, her pronouns, and you can call me Selena. I like how the other group introduced themselves, so I'm copying them. So I am the executive sponsor of Core Element 1, which is Meaningful Advancing Equity in the Region and within Metro Transit. And Core Element 1 has 3 key or main strategies, as you can see in the slide. The strategy number 1 is to really ensure that our service is designed and developed and the delivery is with equity in mind. So I'll tell you a little bit more about how we do that. The second strategy is to implement programs and initiatives that remove barriers and improve access, utilization, and quality for our transit services. And lastly, that we continue to build and invest in practices and we commit to processes that will yield equitable outcomes. And I'll tell you a little bit about those 3 strategies more in detail. So the equity through transit services, you heard today and you will continue to hear how our transit system continues to respond to the needs of more rapid transit, more effective, efficient. So we do that, and we want to make sure that equity is embedded in the process of analyzing the data and looking at metrics that are, we call service metrics. So Metro Transit for the last 2 years have developed an annual service equity evaluation that encompasses service metrics such as metrics that are service availability, number of trips, service utility, access to frequent service, job accessibility, service performance metrics, and all of those are disaggregated by race. So we want to make sure what is the impact on our BIPOC communities through on our service. So that is a commitment that we have. It's a lot of work of 2 particular departments within Metro Transit, service development and strategic initiatives that they collect data and they evaluate, and we produce what we call the annual service evaluation. We're hoping to bring that evaluation from 2022 sometime this summer. That evaluation also includes a compliance piece that we have to do after we launch a new service or a rapid transit service, and that is an equity analysis. That's part of the federal government requirements, and that also looks into disparate impact or disproportionate burden on certain communities of color and low-income communities. So that evaluation is very comprehensive. It has the compliance factor, and also we go deeper into metrics that we feel are relevant to monitor equity impact on service in our communities. The second bullet point there is we just, last year, at the end of the year, we launched D-Line, and we had you have heard that it's going great, and we want to make sure that we do more on understanding if the benefits we intended with D-Line are really actualizing. So we are committed to do more engagement this summer and understand if that new rapid service is creating the impact on accessibility that we intended. So that is a new item on the strategic plan, because we want to make sure that what we are doing is really filling the need that we intended. Let's see. Do I point? There you go. Okay. So improve transit access, utilization, and service. This strategy ensures equity is considered beyond the service point, so it's embedded in important initiatives and activities that Metro Transit does, including what Leslie called the Safety and Security Action Plan. So we are reactivating, and we're scheduled to launch an anti-harassment, sexual harassment campaign also late this summer. After doing engagement, understanding who the stakeholders are, understanding what are the internal processes to report sexual harassment. So we are right now, that work is being focused internally on the reporting, on the tools that we have for riders to report or tell us what their experiences are in terms of harassment and sexual and also the crime statistics as well. We're monitoring that. The second bullet point is to ensure equity is considered in the recruitment and hiring of new employees. We understand that we have processes. We are dedicating funds to ensure that the recruitment doesn't happen traditionally in those areas that we have, done for decades, but we are putting resources to create support for applications. We are delivering programs where people get connected to someone who has the position and can help, understand what are the requirements. There are recruitment opportunities to connect with different media partners, and those are the equity consideration, but not only at the recruitment, but also looking at the hiring data. Who is being hired? How are we monitoring who gets placed in the position, who gets promoted, et cetera. So we're looking at data and for hiring and recruitment and equity data along that way. The last one is develop equitable process for public engagement, and you heard, and thank you very much for the council members that had really great questions today. I was able to listen on how we collect, how we solicit feedback, and what do we do with that feedback? Who is being represented in the feedback we're collecting? So it's important that we continue to examine those practices and utilize practices that are representatives of the region we serve, who are using our transit, and are those voices being considered when we are considering modifications, additions, new lines, et cetera. So that is a work that we're committed to do along with the Director of Public Affairs. Next, this clicker doesn't work that well. So next is to continue to build and invest in organizational practices for equitable outcomes. We recently, at the beginning of the year, we adopted an equity consideration tool, sometimes called, toolkit. So that equity tool helps us on making decisions around, can be budget decisions, service decisions, hiring decisions, and considering the impact on equity that we are on those decisions or projects. Also continue to offer ongoing educational opportunities on racial equity. We had last year a big employee forum on racial equity where everybody at Metro Transit was trained on racial equity, but that was not a 1 year and we stopped doing that. How do we continue to offer ongoing opportunities for learning, lunch and learns, mentoring programs, team activities where racial equity continues to be at the forefront? Our equity metrics program is very tied to the service equity evaluation, and it's very tied to the work of the equity consideration tool. What are metrics that Metro Transit identifies that are going to move and advance equity in the region? And those are an array of metrics. They are from surveys to workforce, to look into features of our facilities, looking into MCAV, contracting. So looking at a lot of metrics that we need to monitor to ensure that equity is being advanced. And we are, this year in the 2023, is the second year that we're participating on that APTA cohort, the equity commitment cohort, and we have at the upcoming mobility conference, the cohort members, there are more than 80 agencies that are participating in this community of practice. We are gathering in person in Minneapolis at the conference and continue to utilize industry best practices. Sometimes, we are the leader of the industry, best practices in terms of equity, advancing equity, having an equity policy, having employee resource groups. So just continue to be connected to the industry standards for equity and inclusion. So a little bit more in case you're interested about what is the equity consideration tool, and it's really a process. It's a set of questions that lead us through a process of looking at the data, the right metrics, equity metrics, looking at the engagement practices, who is being engaged before the decision is being made, and looking into also that impact. Are there alternatives if we know that there is an unintended consequence or an unintended impact, negative impact on a certain group or community? So we are committed to use that. Every department is looking at projects where they're going to be using the equity consideration tool and reporting on the use of that tool. So with that, I know I went really fast at the end, but do you have any questions?
Thank you. Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so is the department manager completing this tool, or does it go down to a lower level?
Yeah, Chair Barber, council member. Yes, so we presented the tool to the directors, and we have asked directors to identify projects within their departments to use the tool. So they're ultimately responsible to utilize the tool. Now, the tool can be used by anybody in Metro Transit. So if you are leading a project, if you are launching a new initiative, if you are making a decision, you're bringing something to this committee, you are able to use the tool. But we have asked directors to identify projects within their areas to utilize the tool. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, and so I guess annually you compile this data, and then who gets that output?
The data of the use of the tool?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we are asking departments to use the tool. So it's a set of questions, and then they can submit the use of the tool to me. So I'm analyzing that data. I'm really looking to enhance the tool and understanding what have been, how that tool has supported their considerations, whether, they are identifying data that is missing for them to make a decision more accordingly with equity impacts, or maybe something that they want to engage a group and they don't have the relationship, so they need to, form that relationship. So it's really monitoring where the gaps are at so we can continue to work with the department. So yeah, I am monitoring that.
Okay. Councilmember Dolkar.
So I have a request for information and request to the chair. So request for information for future timing is DEI goal for hiring for Metro Transit and what the internal process looks like for promotion within Metro Transit, and how that diversity, equity, inclusion goals and hiring goals are set against or set in aligned with Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor's plan for One Minnesota. So that's a request for information for future time. And for the chair, setting aside like good 30 to 40 minutes discussion on just getting a report back and actually hearing from the Metro Transit staff that are working on the equity committee that I think Chief of Staff Kendra's mentioned last time, you referenced today, and it's been a year of this journey. And what this is as a new council member, what I would like to do is really support the work, because it's a huge undertaking for an organization, and it's a huge commitment for Metro Transit. And I would like to make sure that the staff feels supported in the equity inclusion work, and then the staff who are at the front lines feel like their input are respected and are included in the process. But that feels like a good chunk of our time dedicated for it, versus like a good 5 to 10 minutes discussion.
Very, very fair. I understand one challenge we struggle with at this committee. We actually cut 3 business items tonight. So, and they were big. So I think that's one thing that we consistently struggle with. And so I would encourage you, even outside the framework of our meetings, if there's more additional information you need or one-on-one conversations with the staff, do that, because this, of all the committees, we carry a lot. So, but point is well taken, and we all feel that way, but it gets to be a challenge. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilmember Dolkar, I want to follow a little bit on yours. And for a future conversation, we don't have to get into it tonight. I'm curious as to how much engagement there is on these equity goals and strategies and the toolkit with the rank and file. And whether or not, I don't mean to suggest that we need to open a bargaining session over this, but whether or not we're reaching out to ATU and making sure that those folks feel a part of it, because I think that's where a lot of the racial and gender dynamic may occur.
Chair Barber, Councilmember Vento, I'll just mention to you, you know, I think building on Councilmember Dolkar's point, we could provide more of a grounding of kind of the whole cloth view of our DEI work. And part of that too includes an equity and inclusion team. And I don't know if you want to say a few words by it, but it's comprised of employees who are primarily frontline employees. We try to select people from all of the facilities to have representation on it, but I don't know if you want to say some more.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair Barber, Council Member. Absolutely. The work that I presented today is really the coordinated work of the strategic plan, but it does not reflect 100% the work of the equity and inclusion does at Metro Transit. But it's certainly informed. We have a group of 20 members of the equity and inclusion team, and we are 2 staff members, myself and another person. So the 20 members represent frontline employees, direct supervisors, operators, mechanics, all our facilities are represented in that team. They get selected to be, they serve on a 2-year term, and they really are the shakers and doers. They do a lot of this work. They go and they do internal engagement. They set up tables at their garage and they communicate about the safety and security action plan. They collect feedback from peers about the new strategy of the strategic plan. They help develop the anti-harassment campaign. So they are really involved, and they also voice their concerns, and we are, close to decision makers, so we serve as a bridge between frontline employees and decision makers about the experiences of our staff. So yes. And we actually provided some feedback about looking into operators as the stakeholders to do engagement as we do new BRT lines, because they know, they have driven those, routes. So we provide essential feedback, yeah.
Councilmember Pacheco.
Just a quick one. I'm glad to read some of the equity here. I'm going to co-chair the equity advisory here, and I want to make sure that we use the talents that come there. And I'm not seeing how they're connecting, and so hopefully we can get that, and hopefully we'll add a few more council members. I think the goal is to have 4. We have 2 on there right now. But one thing that's been glaringly absent from not only this discussion, but some of the reports that we get back, and that is, I see nothing around small business, and until it's a problem, whether it's the West Broadway group or the St. Paul group, or there's other like the Latino group weighing in over North Minneapolis, but it's always reactionary than coming and looking at the economic value of small business. How are they using transportation? Is it helpful to have a pass if you're at certain level of employees coming, and so I'm going to be looking for that in a lot of things, but I just across the board, and I'll bring it up at the strategic planning meeting we're going to have, but I think it's just glaringly absent from what I've been seeing of where we're going, and except for, where it makes the biggest difference is when we're looking at the Green Line extension and looking at about, billions of dollars of investment around there. We always say, but it's always in reaction. It's not kind of stepping forward first. So I'll be looking for that, and hopefully we can, I'm president of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, so if it sounds like that, that's where it's coming from.
Well, I actually appreciate that. One of the things in our core things of our comprehensive planning process is economic competitiveness. We talk about it a lot. And yes, big businesses matter, but also as a small business owner myself, that small businesses matter too. So I think that's a really good part of bringing to the conversation, especially as we're embarking on the 2050 planning cycle and the 2050 transportation policy plan. So additional questions, Councilmember Carter.
Thank you. It really isn't a question, but, just very much appreciation for the information that you've provided. I know the work is on the ground today, and that also we are going to be working to envision what equity looks like out into the future, and in all aspects of our work, whether we're contract providers or employers, or, if in fact we are working to provide the services that we do, we need to look at every aspect. I know you've said that the different areas determine what projects they're going to be looking at and assessing using the equity tool. And I know that we'll be talking about how everything that happens through the council in the future, and not just out into 2050, but as we talk about 2050, how we impact that work that's happening today will also arrive as we build this work together as council and team, staff team, and our community. So thank you so much. I know you're not doing all of the work. You're making the connections and helping all of the people that work with us so that we can all build that future we want together. Thank you.
All right, any other comments, questions from council members? Again, thank you all for a great discussion. Thank you tonight. If there's nothing else, all right, we are adjourned for the evening.